So the other day I was browsing through the depths of Reddit and I saw this post about training with white belts. And one of the people on that said that they never train with white belts because they don't feel they can get any value from them. And I wanted to address that because honestly, white belts can be some of your best training partners. And I want to explain a little bit about why that is and how it relates to my experience coming up through jiu-jitsu. In case you don't know, I never really had like a formal jiu-jitsu structure. I was always my own coach. I was at the point in UK BJJ where, you know, blue belts and purple belts were teaching. So you kind of went, got some knowledge, came back, taught your guys it, trained with your guys and developed them up. So I was always only ever training with like white belts, maybe the odd blue belt, you know, maybe a purple belt that I taught. And it literally up until kind of my black belt was that kind of path. And so what I had to do is come up with a way to train and be able to train where I could still progress. And the way that I did this is something I call the theory of progressive resistance. Sounds dead fancy, is kind of fancy, but essentially what it is whenever I'm trying to learn a technique, I find the smallest, weakest kind of child that I can to start with, okay? Because what it allows me to do is kind of muscle my way through the technique a little bit as I'm trying to develop it. Okay, so obviously the person needs to have some degree of skill with jiu-jitsu. Like I can't be a brand new beginner, but once someone has a general understanding of like positions, you know, a little bit of posture, maybe even like 6 months down the line, if that, you know, they can be this kind of person. Okay, so start with someone who's super tiny. And then what I did is I progressed up to someone who's a little bit better or a little bit bigger would be the next stage. So let's say you're going to start with like a 60 kilo white belt and then you go up to like a 70 kilo white belt, 80 kilo white belt, and you gradually progress through like weights until you're up to like, you know, 100 kilos, like big strong dudes who you can still perform the technique against. Okay, and then you switch over to blue belts and you do the same thing. So you start with like tinier blue belts, purple belts, you know, tiny blue belts, middle-sized blue belts, bigger blue belts, then same with purple belts. And gradually over the time, what happens is as you get better at the technique, you start to use less strength. So it's kind of got you like these two buckets. Okay, so ideally what my goal is, by the time I'm doing it in like competition against like, you know, good black belts, I'll have, you know, my bucket of strength will be empty, my bucket of technique will be full. I won't need to use tons of strength to utilize it against them. Okay, and that can only come through this kind of idea of progressive resistance, and that's how white belts can fit into your game. Okay, so rather than looking at it as a guy who's like, oh, they don't know what they're doing, it doesn't really matter. As long as they have like a basic understanding of jiu-jitsu, they can still be great training partners. They can still help you develop and help you learn, providing you go in with the right attitude. Go in with an attitude of like, you know, I've got this one technique that I'm going to work, and I'm going to work through it. You know, and then, you know, I'm going to have to use a little bit of muscle to get it to work properly. It will be clunky, it will be ugly, it won't be smooth. And then progressively, you'll be able to get it smoother and better, and you'll be able to do it on bigger people, better people. And by the time that you have done it for, you know, a few months, 6 months, whatever, you'll be like an expert. You won't be using that strength, and you'll be able to do it against anybody. All right, so that's my thought for the day. Hopefully you find it useful. Take that, apply it whenever you're training. If you don't have like additional drilling time, use this idea of progressive resistance as you start to develop your skills.